Alright everyone, we're going to take a look at 3 different brands and types of replaceable blade hunting or skinning knives. First is the Avalon Piranha, then the Outdoor Edge Razor-lite, and the Gerber Vital. We're going to kind of go through these and look at the features that's on them, look at the way the blades come on and off, the design of them, and I'll kind of give you what I think are pluses and minuses of each knife based off of my experience and my knowledge with this. So some of my background with these knives is most of my experience with these knives started and came from wildlife disease sampling, where you're required to have a sterile knife in between each sample. So the removable blade, you can put a new blade on, you have a new sharp clean blade to take a sample with, and basically you can run hand sanitizer over the knife and get a relatively sterile knife, put a new blade on it, and you're ready for the next sample. So that's kind of my background on these before we get into it. So first we're going to take a look at the Avalon Piranha. This is a interlocking folding knife, has a metal belt clip on one side of it. This is probably the first and probably one of the most used replaceable blade knives there is. A lot of people's complaint with this knife is the blades are flimsy. My experience with this, I've never broken a blade on a Piranha ever. If you're breaking blades on these, you're using the knife wrong. You should be able to take a elk, for that matter, from the time you harvest it till the time it's packaged and in your freezer, and never break a blade if you use the knife right. Don't force the knife to do something it can't do or you want it to do. So just keep that in mind with it. Another thing people don't like about it is the blades are pretty difficult to remove or put on for the fact that they're really sharp, and it's a very scary experience trying to put or remove blades on them. I do know that now Avalon makes a plastic clamshell that clamps around the blade and fully contains it so that you can remove the blade safely, and I would assume that you could put a blade on the same way if you felt like it. But I know a lot of people carry a Leatherman or a multi-tool or just a pair of pliers to take the blades off. Basically you just grab this little tab down here, you bend the knife away and push the blade off, and it comes off relatively easy. This is probably my favorite lock design that there is, because there's no mechanical aspect to it at all. It's machined to fit the slot in the blade perfectly, which is what I really like. It's a positive blade lock. You don't have to worry about them accidentally coming loose or anything like that. So that's one of the things that I really like about it. But that also makes it hard for the blade to go off and come on while I use pliers. To put the blade back on, basically you just slide it back on and you'll hear it snap and pop on. But always look to make sure that the blade sits flush down here so that you know that the blade is locked in all the way. That way you don't have an accidental blade slippage if you don't get it on all the way. Another thing I don't like about them, which any folding knife I don't like this giant channel in here, because yes, the blade has to fold in here, but when you're skinning an animal or you're trying to work in a sterile environment, this catches blood, fat, tissue, all kinds of things, and it makes them hard to clean, hard to just keep a knife sterile in general. You know, typically look at most hunter's knife that they pull out, there's fat and tissue and all kinds of things built up in here, and even this one, you know, there's fat in there and tissue. So it makes them really hard to kind of keep in a sterile environment. So that's one of my big complaints, and that's just with any folding skinning knife in general. But looking at the blades, this is a 60XT blade that they send with it. You know, I really like this just because the blade is in a sterile environment, because it's contained in here. You know, basically peel this apart, open it up, get the new blade out, put the new blade on, and you're ready to go basically. The one thing I will say I don't like is the packaging on this is not very durable. So you can see the package for the blade actually stops right here, but the blade is like less than 1/8 of an inch from actually poking through the 2 layers here. So it's not really secure in there in my mind. So I've always kept these like in a case or something, just to keep them from poking holes in my pack or, you know, coming loose and cut me when I'm reaching in trying to get something. So that's the Avalon Piranha. Next we're going to take a look at the Outdoor Edge Razor-lite knife. This is probably one of the ones a lot of people now is going to, because it's a little bit more robust knife, especially for those people who broke a lot of Piranha blades. So they went to this knife. It looks more like a traditional hunting knife. Again, it's a folding knife as well. It's got the lock on the back here. It has a plastic removable belt clip on this side. And to remove the blades on this one, it's relatively simple. It has a small button that's right here. It sticks out just a little bit there, and you depress that button and pull the blade straight off, and the blade comes off. So it's really simple to take the blades off and put them on. Really safe compared to the Havalon. But this to me is also a downfall of it in two ways. The button sticks out a little bit. So I think a lot of people, when they get a hold of this knife, they're going to have a hold of it like this, especially when they're working, and they really have the potential, because their thumb's resting on that button, to depress that button and the blade come loose when they're using it, which could be a potential cut hazard for them. Another thing I don't like is this little hole right here is the only thing that keeps this blade on the knife. So again, we're working with blood, tissue, fat, dirt, even mud, and anything was to either get in this hole or get up in here in the spring where that would go into that hole, the detent would go into that hole, and you've basically put a blade on that you think is locked on, but it hasn't locked on. So it may come off easy again, and that would be a problem. The other thing that I don't like about it is, if you'll watch this hole, there's a small channel that runs through the blade on here where the replaceable blade actually slides into to keep it on the knife and give it a little bit of rigidity, flexible wise. So my downfall I see in this is that blood gets up in there, and then that blood dries, and it could very easily, bind that blade on there. If not blood, it could perhaps rust that on there. And I think even Outdoor Edge mentions this in their warranty. Not quite exactly what they say, but they do mention something about the blades, and they're don't warranty them if they're stuck on, something like that. But that's one of the problems. And the other problem I see with that small channel is, if you were to drop this, hit a rock or anything when you're working without a blade on there, and if this blade doesn't fit in there because it's bent for some reason, then basically your knife is worthless, because you can't get that blade inside of that groove all the way down. So you can't get a new blade on there. So it would make it pretty much useless to me. The blades, this is probably, in my mind, one of, if not the greatest thing about this knife. The way they send their blades. So they send them similar to the Havalon blades in a sterile packaging, but what they've done extra is they've actually put a plastic blade guard on both sides, so that this knife won't cut through the packaging at all. So you don't have that separation that you see with the Havalon blades. They did put a nice little notch here so that you can tear it open to get a new blade out, and I like how they put it on, the end that would go in first, obviously. But to me, this is the single greatest thing about this knife design in general, is the way they send their blades. Everybody needs to, send blades in this manner, sterile with an extra blade protection. It's just a really great way to send blades. So that's the Outdoor Edge Razor-lite. So next we're going to look at the Gerber Vital. This is the fixed blade model. They make a fixed blade and a folding blade model, but I obviously despise the Bacteria Playground channel that's on folding blade knives. So with this model, I went with the fixed blade model just to get away from that. It comes with this little plastic blade cover. I guess you could carry it like this. Me personally, I'm going to carry it with the blade completely removed, separate from the knife. Just safer and easier, I think, to carry it that way. So we'll go ahead and take this off. The blades, they're number 60 blades, so they're actually different than the Havalon blades. So you'll need to know which knife you have and which blade you need for that knife. So this is kind of a hybrid design between the Havalon and the Outdoor Edge for the blade mechanism. It is a spring mechanism that locks on, but it also has the small machine channel that the blade locks into. So you'll see, get this blade put on here. It has a small button back here on the back. When you press that button, you will see the spring press through the other side. Then you can easily remove the blade. So you have the machine part that guides the blade on, and then the spring part locks it together. And when I first started looking at these, I was wondering why they made a thumb stud on a fixed blade knife, because this is on both the fixed and the folding blade knife. And I really wondered why they did that, but then I quickly realized that it's not a thumb stud at all. It is a blade release button protector, basically, for lack of a better term. So it's the same width, the same height as the blade release mechanism. And what that's for is, like, if you're reaching in between ribs to cut something, those ribs and whatever are not going to depress your blade on accident to keep it from releasing, which is one thing that I really like. I think the Outdoor Edge should have something similar to that, whether their button is more recessed or has a shield or something like that to protect you from accidentally depressing it. The one thing I will say that I do not like about this knife is, if we flip it over and look at the back side of it here, it looks like the blade stops right here, but actually the blade goes the full length. You can just see the very sharp edge of the blade right here. In my mind, they needed to make this either wider, so that part of the blade was not usable, or narrower so that you could use more of that blade. Because right now it's literally just a 1/16 of an inch or so of that blade is usable, which I don't like, because I have a feeling I'm going to want to hold the knife like this, or even move it up and maybe hold further up and accidentally cut myself. So that's one thing that I've got to keep in mind when I look at this. I thought that was designed different when I purchased it, and that's one thing I was not a fan of once I got it. But that's really the only downfall that I see. So the mechanism, the release mechanism, it's easily accessible, so you can clean it. If debris gets in there, or fat or dried up blood or anything, you can easily clean this out, whereas the Outdoor Edge knife, that's all contained within the handle, so it makes it really hard to clean out, which is another reason that I like this knife. The blades come in this little plastic semi-hard container. It's okay. They just throw basically a half dozen blades in here, which for me, doing disease sampling and keeping things sterile is not the ideal conditions. I can see the benefit of it for hunting. You can basically throw this in your pack and you have a half dozen blades with you. The one thing I will say is it's only semi-rigid, so if you have a lot of things in your pack, this thing will flex and will actually open, because if there's things in there that push against it and cause it to flex, it can open. So what I did is I purchased an additional add-on blade dispenser. Basically, this is a blade dispenser and a sharps container all in one. Again, they threw about a dozen blades in here that are in a non-sterile environment. They're just one stacked on top of the other, but for hunting reasons, or hunting purposes, that's okay. The sharps container is what I really like, but on the blade dispenser, basically you push a blade out, you pull it the rest of the way out, and you put it on your knife. It's contained in here. You have multiple blades ready to go. Go ahead and push that back in there. But for me, the selling feature on this was a sharps container. So when you're done with this blade, you don't have to keep up with it. You don't have to, worry where you put it in your pack or where you left it sitting at. You don't have to pack it out, for that matter, without a packaging on it. You can basically remove it from the knife. They have a small slit in this. You slide it in there and you drop it in there. Now it's contained within this plastic sharps container, which I really like, especially for disease sampling reasons. Is when I get done with a blade, I can stick it in there, pop that blade off, and it's contained, and I don't have to worry about any diseases coming from that particular blade that was used. Another thing is, guys, wear rubber gloves, please. You may not have caught a disease from anything yet, but that doesn't mean that they're not there or you've not handled animals that have them. For example, you have a small cut on your hand like that, and you come in contact with bodily fluids or blood from an animal, you can very easily contract a disease from them. So please remember to wear rubber, latex gloves, or nitrile gloves for that matter. They're really inexpensive and lightweight. So there's my rant for that. But find whichever knife works for you. If you have a tendency to break a lot of Havlon blades, then you're probably going to lean towards the Outdoor Edge knife. If you like the Havlon but hate the blade mechanism, then you might lean towards the Piranha. So, or the vital. So just keep that in mind when you're looking at which knife you want to take with you or which knife you want to look into buying. So if you've had any experience with them, then you kind of have an idea. For those of you who don't, I hope this video has helped you out, and thanks guys.